Okay, right. Okay, can you tell me who are the two main characters that we have in this particular novel? Anyone? Who are the main characters? Anyone? Who are the two main characters? Right. Edward Tudor and Tom Candy. Right. Very good. Edward Tudor and Tom Candy. Very good. Right. Edward Tudor is actually known to be a prince. Right. He is known to be a prince, and he is a very rich person. He is actually representing the a different social class. You can say that higher class. Right. He is actually representing the higher class, and Tom Candy is representing the lower class. Right. So last week we discussed about the first chapter, and we read the first chapter as well, and we read the second chapter as well. In the first chapter, the writer has given us a clear view about these two characters and what type of characteristics are actually depicted from them. When we refer to the second chapter, right? When we discussed about the second chapter, today we will finish the second chapter, and next week we can move on to third chapter. Now, I want to first and foremost, I want to tell you there may be students who are following Vendor of Sweets by R.K. Narayan, but make sure to remember it is better to follow both novels because sometimes if something happens, you can shift, right? You can shift. So as a teacher, my responsibility is to cover up both novels, right? I will do the both novels because in some schools, majority of the schools, they have selected Vendor of Sweets. If you want to follow Vendor of Sweets, you can join at 1 o'clock. To 2:30 if you did not finish that, and if you are doing Prince and the Pauper, you can join this class. So we have actually completed Vendor of Sweets by R.K. Narayan for 2023 batch, but yet if you want to follow the novel, you can participate to the class using the same link from 1 o'clock to 2:30, right? So this particular class, we are going to pay our attention towards the novel Prince and the Pauper. So last week, actually, we completed our second video related to that particular novel. We discussed about Tom Candy's character. We discussed about what kind of characteristics are depicted from Edward Tudor. And last week, when we discussed about chapter number 2, we discussed certain important points. And today we are going to highlight those points. And today we are going to give you some important quotations also to study from this particular chapter. Now, students, when we are studying about a novel, make sure to remember it can be Vendor of Sweets, it can be Prince and the Pauper, or else Bring It On Your Own. Whatever the novel that you have selected, make sure to remember when you refer to certain chapters, make sure to highlight certain quotations, right? Because you should exactly know the relevance of that particular quotation and what kind of themes are actually associated with that particular quotation. So that knowledge is something very much important when you are studying literature. So that is why we are actually discussing all these novels according to the chapters. Right now, we have completed the first chapter. We wrote the explanation about that, and today we are going to write about the teacher's note when it comes to the second chapter. So what are the things that we discussed in the second chapter? We will pay our attention to that. Last week we actually read the entire story, and today we are going to write down the teacher's note. Let's pay our attention to the teacher's note. So we are going to start chapter number 2 from Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain, right? So the topic of the chapter is Tom's early life. So in this particular chapter, we are going to discuss about Tom's character. Right, in this chapter, we are going to discuss about Tom's character. So, what kind of character is he, and what kind of characteristics are depicted, and furthermore, what can you gain? What can you gain from this particular character, and what are the themes that you have to be very much familiar with when it comes to this particular chapter? These things are very much important to pay your attention. Right? Okay. You can start writing. So, we are in chapter number 2. A few years pass. London is large and busy, full of dirty, narrow streets and rickety houses. Tom Canty lives in Offal Court near London Bridge. So in this particular chapter, a very good background description was actually given about the city of London, right? A very good, powerful background description was given about the city of London. Though Edward Tudor lived in a very much luxurious environment, though he belongs to the higher class, Tom Canty belongs to the lower class, right? So the social disparity can be identified as one of the major themes when it comes to the novel. Social disparity. This is what you have to understand, right? So a few years pass, London is large and busy, full of dirty, narrow streets and rickety houses. Tom Canty lives in Offal Court near London Bridge. It's full of some London's poorest families, and the Canty family, Tom, his father John Canty, his mother, his grandmother Grandma Canty, and his twin sisters, Nan and Bet, is packed into one room on the third floor of an old house. So in this particular chapter, we will get more information about Tom's family members, right? So it is kind of a huge family. If you pay your attention very carefully, you will realize, right? It is kind of a huge family, right? A huge family. So who are the characters? Make sure to remember the names of these characters. Now, don't think that we will not be able to complete the novel. I am pretty sure we can complete the novel. So my personal advice for you is, it is better to learn both novels, right? Sometimes in your school, you may be doing Ender of Sweets, right? But just imagine, right? If the question is difficult to answer, then you don't have any option at all. So some students are continuously asking the questions, do we have to follow both novels? No, you don't have to. But make sure to understand, when you have both novels, then you have an option. Can you understand what I'm explaining here? So basically, you have an option. So you can select whatever the novel and then you can write answers. So make sure to participate classes and make sure to complete the work, right? Because we have enough time, we will do extra classes as well. We are doing online classes, so you have enough time to complete. Now we are in chapter number 2, right? So very easily we can complete the entire story. So make sure to get the maximum advantage. Don't think that, okay, this novel is not that I am following. It is better to follow both novels. It will be a very powerful advantage for you, right? Because when it comes to the exam, you can select whatever the novel that you like. So here, in this particular chapter, the writer has given us more information about Tom Canty's family, right? So the Tom Canty's family actually consists of John Canty and his mother, his grandmother, Grandma Canty, and his twin sisters, Nan and Bet, is packed into one room on the third floor of an old house. So overpopulation can be identified as one of the major problems. So in this particular family, a lot of people were there. As a result of that, definitely most of the people, they had to do a lot of jobs in order to fulfill their hunger. So this is something very much natural. When you have a lot of family members, definitely there should be 3 or 4 breadwinners in order to fulfill the mouths. So this is the reality. As a result of that, Tom Canty had to work hard, right? An unfortunate situation is that Tom Canty's father is a drunkard. So he can be identified as an abusive father. So Tom Canty faced number of problems, troubles, and tribunals due to the overpopulation of the family. But whatever said and done, Tom Canty's mother and Tom Canty's sisters actually showed a lot of love and affection towards him. That can be identified as the only relief that he received in his life. That was the only relief that he received in his life, right? So there is only one bed for John and his wife. The rest of the family sleeps on the floor. Now you can understand the suffocating situation, right? There is only one bed for John and his wife. The rest of the family sleeps on the floor. John and Grandma Canty are both beggars and thieves who force the children to go begging too. Now you can understand what kind of precedent was actually given by the adults, right? What kind of precedent was actually given by the adult? What do you mean by precedent? Purvādarsha. වැඩිහිටියෝ ළමයිට දෙන්නේ මොන වගේ පූර්වාදර්ශයක්ද කියලා දැන් ඔබට පේනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ ටොම් කැන්ටිගේ සීයායි, ටොම් කැන්ටිගේ ආච්චි, ටොම් කැන්ටිගේ තාත්තයි දෙන්නම beggars. ඒගොල්ලෝ හිඟා කනවා. ඒ විතරක් නෙමෙයි ඒගොල්ලෝ අනිත් අයව පොළඹවනවා ගිහිල්ලා යම් යම් දේවල් හොරකම් කරන්න. So they are influencing children to go and steal. So you can understand the industrial England. You can very clearly understand the industrial England, the situation that actually occurred during the industrialization, right? So I have mentioned that John and Grandma Canty are both beggars and thieves who force the children to go begging too. Among the residents of the court is Father Andrew. Now, can you remember Father Andrew? Why Father Andrew's character is very important to us? Anyone? Last week I told you why Father Andrew's character is important. Who is Father Andrew? What kind of contribution was done by Father Andrew to Tom Canty? Can you remember? What is the importance of the character? Anyone? Right? He taught Tom Canty reading and writing. Very good. Thank you, Dinu. Very good. Right? Father Andrew is the person who taught reading and writing for Tom Canty. At that type of political situation, at that type of social situation, children were not allowed for education. Only upper class, only children who belong to the upper class receive that possibility to receive education, right? Each and every student did not get that privilege to get education, right? They did not get education. Thank you, Hanan, right? So Tom Canty belongs to the lower class. So he never received a chance to get education. Can you understand? As a result of that, what actually happened? right? Most of the lower class children, they were uneducated, right? So this is what happened at that time, right? So social problems, you have to understand social problems as well. So here we discuss about Father Andrew's contribution. Father Andrew is the person who provided some kind of education to Tom Candy. So in that perspective, Father Andrew's character is important. Father Andrew, a priest who was turned out his former job and now serves on a small pension, father teaches Tom Candy and children about morality. So this particular father actually teaches about morality and he teaches about different languages as well. So in that perspective, he can be identified as a very much generous character, right? Very much generous, pious character, right? Father Andrew's character is that much important. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me the message. Today we are discussing about Prince and the Pauper, our prescribed novel, right? Make sure to complete both novels. Then it will be very much important for you, right? So it is better to cover both novels. Then at least you know the story. If something happens, right, then you have some kind of survival. Right. So my dear students, pay your attention and write down. We are discussing about the second chapter, right? Tom's early life. In this chapter, we discussed about different types of troubles and tribunals actually faced by Tom Canty, right? Different types of troubles and tribunals actually faced by Tom Canty, and we discussed about Tom Canty's family background, right? So we can clearly understand what kind of social problems actually faced by Tom Canty uh, based on his family background, right? So here we can clearly understand a clear contrast between Edward Tudor's life and Tom Canty's life, right? So both are actually belong to the same age. Both were actually born on the same date. But if you refer to these two characters, you will realize that a clear difference when it comes to these two characters based on the social conditions. This is what we call social disparity, right? This is what we call social disparity. One of the major themes that we highlight in this particular novel, right? Social disparity. So please make sure to pay your attention. If you have finished, please pass me a message. We will move on to the next part. Hurry up and write down. Right, okay. So we will move on from there. I hope that you guys have completed. Right, is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. So we will move on. I hope you guys have completed. Right, very good. So we are in the second chapter still, huh? Right. Father teaches the Kanti children about morality. Additionally, he teaches from how to read and write, including some Latin. So Latin language actually was very much precious, or else even some kind of royal value built, right? So most of the people, they did not know Latin. So if you know Latin language, it actually gave some kind of privilege. It actually provided some kind of respect to you, because average people, they did not know Latin. Now the same scenario is actually happening in Sri Lanka as well, right? So if you know English, if you know how to use English, the fluency of English has become a weapon today. I'm not going to tell that it is correct, but that is what happened in Sri Lanka, right? English is just a language. But if you can use English fluently, right, it can help you a lot. Just like that, right? At that time period, what actually happened, they paid a lot of attention towards Latin language, right? Latin language. So Father Andrew, without having any second thoughts, he actually taught Latin language as well. So later we can understand why Latin language is very much significant when it comes to this particular story. We will move on. Although awful court is full of hunger, fighting, and drinking, Tom's early childhood wasn't entirely unhappy. So whatever said and done, even though there were a lot of problems, even though there were a lot of fights, right? Even though there were a lot of conflicts, even though people suffocated from abject poverty, Tom's early life was not that much unhappy. It was unhappy, there is no doubt about that, but even the most desperate times, Tom Canty was able to find some kind of happiness, right? He found that happiness. So here, that is what I have highlighted, right? So although awful court is full of hunger, fighting, and drinking, Tom's early childhood was not entirely unhappy. John and Grandma often beat Tom for not bringing home money from begging, but his life was just like every other young boy's in the court, and so he thought it was natural. So this is what actually happens to almost all the children who lived at that time period in the awful court. This is not the experience of Tom Canty. Almost all the boys face the same situation, right? Apart from Edward Tudor, right? All the other boys who lived in this particular era, who were at the same age, right? They had to face number of troubles and tribunals, and most of the time their parents were very much abusive. They always actually punished these children, and they were asking to bring something to their houses because children were taken as a burden. Children were not taken as an asset. This is what you have to understand. Children were taken as a burden. They were not taken as an asset. Can you understand my explanation? I hope you guys can understand, right? So children were taken as a burden. They were not taken as an asset. So what Tom Canty's father and Tom Canty's grandmother, what did they do? They actually punished Tom Canty, and they always asked to bring something, right? So they never actually explained to him that you should not steal, you should not engage all these illegal things. They always motivated him to do all these illegal things. They always motivated, right? That is what we can understand. So they always expected something from Tom Canty. So Tom Canty had to face number of punishments, but he did not care because he identified that this is the natural, spontaneous situation which will be very much applicable for each and every student, each and every boy who lived in the awful court. So the writer, or else the narrator, my dear students, portrays the tragedy of children who lived in the lower class by resembling the character of Tom Canty. Can you understand? By resembling the character of Tom Canty. This is what you have to pay your attention. Can you understand? Right? So Tom Canty is not an individual character. By referring Tom Canty's character, the writer or else the narrator tries to figure out, tries to portray the reality of most of the children who lived in the awful court, or else you can say who lived under the crucial circumstances, especially because they belong to the lower class. Very good, right? Furthermore, right, we will move on from there. Whenever Tom's mother could, she could sneak him scraps of food from her plate, although John would beat her for it as well. So sometimes actually the motherly love, the affection was actually given by Tom's mother. So Tom's mother actually provided morsel of food. If she was able to give small amount of food even, right, she actually offered that to Tom. So that clearly shows us what kind of motherly love, what kind of unconditional love was actually expressed by Tom's mother. But the brutal situation is if Tom's father got to know about this, what will happen? He will definitely beat Tom's mother as well. So this is the most suffocating situation that you have to understand. So as readers, what we can realize in this particular chapter, the brutality depicted from Tom Candy's father, John Candy, right? And how he abused, right? How he motivated children to engage in illegal actions, right? So this is what you can understand. And most importantly, children were taken as a burden. right? දරුවන්ව හඳුන්වන්නේ බරක් විදියට. ඒගොල්ලෝ සමාජයට වත්කමක් නෙමෙයි ඒ කාලේ. දැන්නේ දරුවෝ වත්කමක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. දැන්නේ ජාත්‍යන්තර පාසල් වලට දාලා උගන්වන්නේ. ඉස්සර කාලේ එහෙම නෑ. ළමයි කියලා කියන්නේ කරුමයක්. ළමයි කියන්නේ වදයක්. Children were taken as a burden, not as an asset, right? So this is the part that you have to highlight. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Yeah, thank you, Nikesan. Thank you for your comment, Nikesan. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Puta. Very good. Please hurry up and write. Pass me a message if you have finished. Make sure to understand the story from the very beginning, then you can write answers. If something happens in the exam regarding vendor of sweets, you can shift to this particular novel. It's a plus point, right? You can always shift into this particular novel, right? So it is a very powerful plus point that you have when it comes to literature. Take the maximum advantage of them. Right, I need 5 students to complete. Hurry up and start. Right, okay. We will move on to the next part. I hope you guys have completed. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. So we will move on to the next part. I hope you guys have completed. Right. Tom spends a lot of time listening to Father Andrew's stories about castles, kings, princes, and giants, right? So this is what actually happens. So Tom lives in a kind of an imaginary world, right? So this is why we explained you, even though he suffocated with a lot of physical harassments, whatever said and done, he did not forget to enjoy his life, right? So Tom may be having a lot of troubles and tribunals, there is no doubt about that. But whatever said and done, my dear students, you have to understand, right? He actually enjoyed his life because of Father Andrew's stories, right? Okay, now here Tom spends a lot of time listening to Father Andrew's stories about castles, kings, princes, and giants. At night, Tom dreams of what life in a place is like, what life is in a palace is like, and wishes he could see a prince just once. So he gained some kind of ultimate motive in his life. One day, he wanted to see a prince. This actually became one of the most fundamental needs in his life. So he wanted to achieve this particular target. So he was motivated, he was influenced by Father Andrew's stories related to kings, castles, and giants. That makes him more aware of how dirty and shabby his clothes are, and he starts spending more time bathing in Thames, right? So he identified that, okay, with these actually poor clothes, I cannot become a prince. So here in this particular novel, Puta, clothes play an important theme, right? So different types of clothes play an important theme, because if you can remember, Tom Canty and Edward Tudor, they actually shift their roles. I have explained you the plot of the story. I explained you, they shift their roles. How do they shift their roles? By referring to their clothes. Can you understand? So clothes can be identified as one of the major themes in this particular novel. So you have to pay your attention for the clothes. So based on clothes, the first thing that actually came to Tom Canty's mind, the first thing that I have to change myself is my outer appearance. So here, Mark Twain tries to explain the fact that you should not judge a character from his or her outer appearance, right? So when Tom Canty became the prince, right, nobody actually recognized him because Tom Canty wore all the beautiful, splendid clothes which were actually worn by Edward Tudor. When Edward Tudor actually changed his costumes, nobody recognized Edward Tudor as a prince. So now you can understand what kind of power is there when it comes to clothes, right? So soon after, he imagined about different types of kings, queens, and giants. He identified that, Tom Canty identified that I have to change my clothes. Because like, if my clothes are, if I continue to wear like this, right? So nobody will recognize me as a prince. So definitely I have to think about my cleanliness, right? It is true that always these young boys actually face troubles and tribunals, and they get dirty due to their society, due to their environment. But nevertheless, right, Tom Canty actually thought about his cleanliness, right? He thought about his cleanliness. That is important, right? So Tom starts imitating the speech and manners of royalty, which impresses young and old people alike in Offal Court, right? So Tom starts to actually behave like a prince because he wanted to achieve that particular target. So even the people who live in Offal Court, they saw this behavior from Tom Canty, so they also liked this. This is what happened. Tom organizes a mock royal court, and his friends all play along until they have to go begging. But Tom's wish to see a prince becomes an all-consuming, ever-present thought, right? Still, his dream was actually so much far away. What was the ultimate dream that he wanted to achieve in his life? He wanted to see a prince. But that particular dream seems to be very much far away, right? But however, he actually acts as a prince, right? He made himself a mock court with the help of his friends, right? So even people who lived in the Offal Court showed some respect, right? Showed some respect towards him because like even they believed that this boy has got something, right? So this is important. But Tom's wish to see a prince becomes an all-consuming, ever-present thought. One day in January, after trudging around all day in the rain and hungering after meat pies that he has never been able to afford, Tom returns home soaked through from the rain and covered in mud. Right? So whatever said and done, whatever the ambitions that you have at the end of the day, you have to understand your real personality and where you came from. Right? Even though he acted as a prince, right? Tom is known to be a beggar, right? He is known to be a beggar. He is a poor boy. Whatever said and done, right? So this is what the writer has actually explained. So one day in January, after trudging around all day in the rain and hungering after meat pies that he has never been able to afford, right? So you can understand poverty and hunger actually these people, these children actually gone through in their lives. Tom returns home soaked through from the rain and covered in mud, right? So he came one day to the house covered in mud. So this is what actually happened. So in this particular chapter, we discussed about Tom Canty's dream and Tom Canty's reality. So here we can say appearance versus reality. And you have to pay your attention towards the clothes because clothes are very much important. It is a very powerful theme when it comes to this particular story. Make sure to remember that clothes are actually representing the appearance versus reality because people never recognize Tom Canty as a beggar soon after he changes his clothes with Edward Tudor. On the other hand, even though Edward Tudor is known to be the prince, soon after he changed his clothes, nobody will recognize that he is the next successor, right? So he will be known to be, he will be actually identified as a beggar, right? So this is what happens. So clothes actually made a huge difference. So the writer tries to explain the fact that society actually so the society is actually going to judge you based on your outer appearance. Doesn't matter whether you are a prince or a pauper. At the end of the day, you will be judged based on your clothes, right? So the outer appearance, even though we are not going to give validity and valuability to the outer appearance of people as literature students, most of the average people they have given much more valuability and validity to the outer appearance of people. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Exactly, Nikesh, and you are correct. Very good. Please pass me a message if you have finished. Hurry up. Right. So shall we start? Shall we move on? I hope that you guys have completed. Right. Okay. Is there anyone who is still writing? Okay, I hope that you guys have completed. We will move on from there. Right. Right. So we have been discussing about Tom Canty's dream, right? So we clearly expressed about Tom Canty's dream, what kind of dream that he had in his life, right? One day he wanted to be a prince. So he understood that the dream was not actually easy to achieve. He understood that this is not going to be a successful dream, but he never gave up, right? He never gave up. That is what we have to understand. Whatever this quality of resilience is something very much important again that you have to pay your attention when we discuss about Tom Canty, right? So whatever said and done, he did not give up. That part is very much important. Okay. Even John and Grandma are moved by how sad Tom looks and they refrain from beating him as roughly as they normally would. Now, this is something very much important now. Basically, John and Grandma, they always actually punished him. Now, soon after they saw Tom Canty, right, in this particular situation, they did not actually punish him because they also became very much emotional, right? Now, this part is very much important. Puta, pay your attention. Even John and Grandma are moved by how sad Tom looks and they refrain from beating him as roughly as they normally would. Normally, they actually punish him, right? They abuse him. But in this particular situation, they did not do like that. They did not do like that, right? That is what actually happened. Even John and Grandma are moved by how sad Tom looks and they refrain from beating him as roughly as they normally would. All night, Tom dreams of royal courts full of lords and ladies. When he wakes up the next morning, he is heartbroken to realize that the memory of these dreams makes his surroundings seem even more wretched than the day before, right? So little by little, he is actually going to live this in this imaginary world. And he identified that none of these dreams are going to come true. At the end of the day, that is the reality that he had actually identified, right? Whatever said and done. In the 16th century, education was very expensive, so most lower class families weren't able to put their children in schools. In fact, schools weren't particularly popular. Rich families hired tutors that specialize in different subjects. Tom's early education sets him apart from most kids his age and even his own family. Perhaps more importantly, Father Andrew teaches Tom about morality, which helps motivate Tom to set his sights on something higher than being a beggar or thief like his father. So here we discuss about the theme of education. So this particular paragraph is important. Now, I told you at that time period, people did not pay attention towards the education of their children. I have explained that. In the 16th century, what actually happened, my dear students, education was very expensive, right? People did not have money to send their children to schools, right? And children were actually taken as a burden. I told you that. You have to understand this, right? දරුවන්ව ඇත්තටම දරුවන්ට හොඳ අධ්‍යාපනයක් ලබා දෙන්න, ටියුෂන් පන්ති යවන්න, උපාධියක් කරන් දෙන්න ඒ වගේ වත්කමක් මිනිස්සුන්ට තිබුණේ නැහැ. අධ්‍යාපනය කියන්නේ ඉතාලම වටින දෙයක්. ඒ කාලේ ඇත්තටම ටොම් කැන්ටිගේ තාත්තට ඒකට සල්ලි නැහැ. කණ්ඩවත් සල්ලි නැහැ. ඉතින් මේ වලට සල්ලි තියෙන විදියක් නැහැනේ. සරලව තේරුම් ගන්න, right? In the 16th century, education was very expensive, so most lower class families weren't able to put their children in school. In fact, schools were not particularly popular. Rich families hired tutors that specialize in different subjects, right? So rich families actually hired tutors just like tuition classes. The people who can afford that amount, they put their children to tuition classes and they actually hired private tutors. Tom's early education sets him apart from most kids his age and even his own family. Now we have to understand, due to the education that he received from Father Andrew, only he became a different character. Otherwise, he would have become a thief or a beggar just like his father. So here, what is the point that we have to highlight? Education can transform your life. Education can transform your life. So this is the message that you have to pay your attention, right? So since because Tom Canty received proper education, what actually happened? He changed himself. He changed himself
he was actually identified as a different character from other kids of his age, and he did not become a thief or a beggar like his father because he had different expectations in his life. That is because of education. So in this novel, we discuss about the importance of education as well. I hope you can understand because I have explained everything in simple language. Anybody can understand? Everything is explained in simple language. So from this particular paragraph, you can understand the importance of education. Now, Tom Canty actually thought in a different manner. He actually thought kind of a radical manner. That is because of education, right? Whatever the education that he received, whatever the knowledge about Latin that he received, right? That is why he thought that, okay, I have to climb up the social ladder. I should not be a beggar forever. I should not be a thief just like my father. I should be a different character. So who gave this power to Tom? Now, this is important, right? Education has helped number of people in order to climb up the social ladder. A carpenter's son will not be a carpenter. A mason's son will not be another mason. He may be a doctor, engineer, or any other higher profession than his father. So same thing happened here, right? Because of the education. So Mark Twain clearly shows us the importance of education as well. Due to education, everything changed. Hurry up and write down. We discuss about the education system as well. Right. How many of you are still writing? Please pass me a message. Puta, we discussed about important points, right? So we are in chapter number 2, right? Definitely we will be able to complete the entire novel, right? So please make sure to participate for the class. Otherwise, you may be thinking that I am doing End of Sweet, so we have finished the novel and we can enjoy. There is nothing like that. Make sure to get ready from both novels. It will be very much beneficial for you when it comes to the exam, right? So here we discussed about education, the theme of education, which is something very much important, right? So how education can transform people, irrespective of social class, irrespective of race or religion, how education can transform people. Even though Tom Canty belongs to the lower class, right? The punishments and the previous treatments which were offered by his father and grandmother were stopped due to his education, due to his behavior. All the other people who lived in awful court, they showed a lot of respect towards Tom Canty because of his education, due to his education. So here, Tom Canty had a different type of a dream. Otherwise, Tom Canty would have become a thief or else a beggar, just like his father. But he never wanted to be like that. He wanted to climb up the social ladder. He wanted to become a prince, right? He wanted to climb up the social ladder. So what is the weapon actually used by him in order to climb up the social ladder? That is education. So that provides a very powerful moral message for our students as well. If you want to climb up the social ladder, you can use education as a weapon, right? If you want to climb up the social ladder, you can use education as a weapon. Very good. We will move on to the next part. Tom is surrounded by misery and crime. Now, this is what you have to highlight, right? So Tom's entire life is actually surrounded by misery and crime. In fact, he learns to connect crime with misery, right? So that is how his father also actually provided some kind of knowledge. His father actually abused him. His father actually influenced him to become a beggar or else to become a thief. But Tom never liked it, right? But he finds an escape from all it in Father Andrew's stories. So Father Andrew's stories actually provided him some kind of escapism. That is why I explained you, even though Tom lived in a very much unhappy, suffocative environment, even though his father and grandmother actually punished him brutally, he was not unhappy about his life. Can you understand? He was not unhappy, right? He was not unhappy. He found his happiness. He found his happiness from Father Andrew's stories, right? So Father Andrew's stories actually provided some kind of escapism for him. Some kind of escapism. So this is what you have to understand. Some kind of escapism. We will move on. Furthermore, Tom learns about selflessness and devotion from his mother, who puts her own self at risk to make him more comfortable. So he learns about valuable human emotions, valuable human values. Nightingale and the Rose by Oscar Wilde. You may have learned about this word. Selflessness. Right. So Tom learns about empathy, sympathy, selflessness, great human values from his mother. So that is also kind of an education, right? Not formal education, informal education, right? Tom learns about selflessness and devotion from his mother, who puts her own self at risk to make him more comfortable. Because Tom has these two positive influences, he does not follow in his father's footsteps by becoming a thief. Due to these two characters, due to these two influences, right, Tom is not going to follow his father's footsteps. He is not going to become a beggar or else a thief. Now you can understand how formal education given by Andrew, Father Andrew, and the informal education actually provided by Tom Canty's mother actually created some kind of a positive change. Some kind of a positive change in this particular child. It created some kind of a positive change. Can you understand? Very good, right? Although Tom finds comfort and escapes in the stories about royalty and palace life, eventually it haunts him and makes living in the filthy slums and among criminals that much harder. So this is the reality, Puta. Whatever said and done, he dreams about these beautiful palaces and castles and giants and kings and queens. He dreams about that, but the reality is something totally different. Whatever said and done, he can live in this imaginary world for a short period of time. At the end of the day, we all have to understand the reality, that what is the reality? The reality is actually he is living in a very much suffocative, very much vulnerable environment. Very much suffocative, very much vulnerable environment, right? With a lot of criminals and a lot of filthy background, right? So this is the reality. So Tom also felt that. He felt that even though I am living in this imaginary world, my reality is something else. I can live for a long period of time in this particular imaginary world, thinking about these queens, kings, and all the giants, right? But when it comes to the reality, the situation is very much suffocating, right? This is because, right, eventually it haunts him and makes living in the filthy slums and among criminals that much harder. This is because at the time, a person's birth determined their place in society. This is very much important, my dear students. Now we are discussing about themes one by one. Please highlight, my dear students, right? Very important. This is because at the time, a person's birth determined their place in society. So if you were born in the slums, already your fate is decided. Doesn't matter what kind of good qualities, good education that you possess. If you were born in a slum, right, they will treat you in a different manner, right? If you were born in a palace, according to the birthplace, you will be given a lot of privileges. Can you understand the difference? So at that time period, a person was actually provided privilege or else whatever the luxuries based on the place that they were born. So Tom Canty was born in Court. So even though he completed his education or degree or master's or whatever, even though he showed a lot of empathy and sympathy and selflessness to the other people, he will never be able to achieve that particular target based on the place he was born. Can you understand? Based on the place he was born. He was born in a slum. Really? He's a graduate. He completed masters. We know about his history. He was born in a slum. We know about his father's and mother's history, right? So this is how people treat. But today it has changed up to some extent. In today's society, it has changed up to some extent. Up to some extent, but even today we have that problem. Even today we have that problem, right? Please highlight that part, Puta. Please make sure to highlight that. This is because at the time, a person's birth determined their place in society. Even though Tom is educated, he knows that nobody will ever see him as more than a beggar, and so he will never be allowed into the upper class of the society. Very simple, right? Very simple language, anybody can understand. Very simple language, anybody can understand, right? So the class difference, my dear students, we pay our attention towards the class difference, right? This is what we call the class difference. So Tom identified the truth. What was the truth? The truth is, right, he will never be able to achieve success in his life. He will never be able to achieve success in his life based on his birthplace, right? So this is what happens. So social disparity, class difference, these are the things that we have to pay our attention. And in chapter number 2, we paid our attention towards education as well. So please make sure to remember these themes, and I will give you quotations in order to highlight these themes. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. Right. So is there anyone who is still writing? Now you can understand the story is little bit entertaining, right? Previously, we discussed about traditionality and modernity, right? Vendor of Sweets is also a very much entertaining novel, but here also you have a lot of things to write. That is why I am telling you, if you target this particular novel, you can write a lot, right? This is what you have to understand. You can write a lot. So if you have finished, please pass me a message. Hurry up. Right. Okay. So we will move on to the next part. Is there anyone who is still writing? Do you need more time? Shall we move on to the next part? Please pass me a message. Do you need extra time? Right. Okay. Good. Right. Now this paragraph is important from chapter number 2. Right. I don't want to write down the entire paragraph, but it is better that if you can study at least the half, because this is the paragraph that I am going to highlight when it comes to chapter number 2. Let's read this very carefully. All of Offalcourt was just such another hive as Canty's house. Drunkenness, riot, and brawling were the order there. Every night and nearly all night long, broken heads were as common as hunger in that place. Yet, little Tom was not unhappy. He had a hard time of it, but did not know it. When he came home empty-handed at night, he knew his father would curse him and thrash him first. And that when he was done, the awful grandmother would do it all over again and improve on it. And that away in the night, his starving mother would slip to him stealthily with any miserable scrap or crust she had been able to save for him by going hungry herself. Notwithstanding, she was often caught in that sort of treason and soundly beaten for it by her husband. So the entire part that we discussed today, all the themes that we discussed today can be clearly identified from this particular situation. You can clearly understand about the entire discussion that we paid attention towards when it comes to chapter number 2. That entire idea can be referred to from this particular paragraph. So I'm not asking you to study the entire paragraph. You don't want to do that, but at least 2 or 3 lines. If you can remember 2 or 3 lines from this, you can clearly explain about the social problems, which I explained to you based on this particular chapter, right? So in this particular chapter, we can understand whatever said and done under the crucial circumstances, how Tom actually enjoyed his life and what kind of lifestyle was actually followed by the people who lived in the Offalcourt. Sympathy, empathy, and selflessness actually depicted from Tom Canty's mother, right? And what kind of brutality, on the other hand, right? The contrast, what kind of brutality, what kind of inhumanity was actually possessed by Tom Canty's father and Tom Canty's grandmother. So when we go through chapter number 2 from Prince and the Pauper, this particular chapter can be identified as one of the most important chapters or else paragraphs that we have to pay our attention. I am not asking you to study the entire paragraph, but at least make sure to remember 2 or 3 lines. I don't know what is the page number. Can somebody tell me the page number where this particular paragraph occurred? I don't know the page number, right? So you can find out the page number and you can highlight this, right? So it starts with all Offalcourt. It is in actually page number 3, right? Is it page number 3, right? Okay, paragraph number 2, page number 3. So pay your attention. මේ මුළු ඡේදෙම පාඩම් කරගන්න ඕනේ. අඩුම ගානේ අර සමාජ ප්‍රශ්න ටික ගැන කතා කරන්න, ටොම්ගේ ජීවිතය ගැන කතා කරන්න, ඒක සාක්ෂි විදියට පෙන්නන්න මේකෙන් lines 3ක්වත් මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ. Because we have to show that Tom Canty's life is totally different from Edward Tudor. That is what we call contrast. That is what we call contrast. So in order to show that contrast and the problems actually faced by these lower class people, this passage will definitely help you. As a result of that, you have to go through this particular passage. We will move on. The above quotation deals with the theme of nature and neuter, right? Nature and neuter. Now we are discussing about themes. Please make sure to pay your attention. Nature and neuter. Mark Twain had an avid interest in human nature and how people become who they are. Above all, Twain believed that a person's environment, their home life, social status, relationships, and so on do more to determine a person's character than mere biology or genetics. So this is something very much important. We discuss about a very important theme, very much important theme when it comes to this particular novel, that is nature and nurture. Nature and nurture, right? Nature is the background that you live. That particular nature will nurture you, right? So a person will be molded by the outside environment, right? That is what we call the nature will nurture you. Nurture means you will be taught certain things by the outside environment, right? So this is what actually happens. So nature will nurture you. Nature means the outside environment, the background. You did not complete the last slide means this one. You don't have to write this, Puta. You don't have to write this. You don't have to write this. Just remember this particular, you mean this one. You did not write this one. You did not complete this one. I thought that you have completed. Didn't you complete this? I thought that you have completed. Didn't you complete this one? No, red one, you don't have to write everything because it's a very long paragraph. Just make sure to write only 2 or 3 lines. From here or here, just 2 or 3 lines are more than enough. Because like, in order to show this, right, in order to show this disparity, social disparity and social problems, this passage will be very much important. So 2 or 3 lines will be more than enough, right? So here I wanted to show you the theme, right? Nature and nurture, right? Nature and nurture. What do you mean by nature and nurture? The nature means the outside environment that you live. Now, as an example, if you are living in a slum, the language, the association, people around you, your friends will be determined by that nature. So naturally, you will also be that type of a person. But if you are living in a very good environment, right, where you have a lot of friends whose parents are doctors, lawyers, engineers, right? So you will have a different environment and you will become a different person. Can you understand? So your school plays very important role when it comes to this nurturing part, right? If the nature of your school is good, definitely it will nurture you towards a positive path, right? This is what actually happens. So nature means the outside environment, and based on the outside environment, you will get some experience and you will become a different person. So the above quotation deals with the theme of nature and nurture. Mark Twain had an avid interest in human nature and how people become who they are. Above all, right now, the society determined that people will be, the fate of the people will be determined by the place where they were born. දැන් ඒ කාලේ සමාජයේ ගත්ත තීරණය තමයි මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ජාතකයේ තීරණය කරන්නේ උපන්න තැන අනුව. ඉපදිච්ච තැන අනුව. Right? That is how people believe. That is what people believed at that time period. So this is what Mark Twain tries to highlight. Now he says, right, above all, Twain believed that a person's environment, environment means the nature. Environment means the nature, right? The outside environment, right? That a person's environment, their home life, social status, relationships, and so on, do more to determine a person's character than mere biology or genetics. So he tries to explain the fact that you will achieve success in your life. You will be labeled in your life, not because of your genetics. Just because your father is a king, right? You will not become a prince. Try to understand, it will be determined by your outside environment. It will not come to you from genetics. Now, the best example is Tom Canty's father is a beggar. Tom Canty's father is a drunkard. But Tom Canty did not become like that. So it is not actually in genetics. It is not actually in genetics. Or biologically, it will not happen. It will happen according to the environment. It will happen according to the nature. Right? The Prince and the Pauper features a colorful cast of characters ranging from alcoholics to optimistic street urchins to royalty to criminals, right? So here we have different types of characters, my dear students. You have to highlight them, right? You have to highlight them. Who are the different types of characters that we meet in this particular novel? The Prince and the Pauper features a colorful cast of characters ranging from alcoholics, optimistic street urchins, royalty to criminals, right? So here the first theme that we discussed, the first theme that is actually nature and nurture, right? Nature is influencing your nurturing. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right. Okay. So I hope that you guys have completed. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. So we will go to the last explanation, right? You guys can write down. If this were true, then Tom, whose parents are both very poor and very ignorant, would probably be ignorant too, right? So if this were true, then Tom, whose parents are both very poor and very ignorant, would probably be ignorant too. And Edward, whose father's name is feared by people all over England, would probably be single-mindedly power-hungry and cold. Instead, Edward and Tom seems to be products of the most positive aspects of their respective environments, right? So now you can understand, right? The Tom actually did not become like his mother or father, even though they are ignorant. Tom became a very much educated person. On the other hand, right, Edward showed a lot of empathy and sympathy to people, even though Edward's father was actually feared by people who lived in England. Edward was not that kind of a person, right? He was a very much selfless character who showed a lot of empathy and sympathy towards people. Twain describes the early life of Tom Canty, one of the two protagonists of the story. The name of the neighborhood, Offalcourt, is the first indication that Tom is growing up in a slum. So here we have to pay our attention towards this Offalcourt as well. Offalcourt is the slum where he lives. Offal is another word for refuse or waste, which describes both the physical environment, filthy, unkempt, stinky, right? The filthy environment that he lived, and the way many people from the upper classes would describe the impoverished people who live there, right? So Tom was born in a filthy environment. The word offal itself means actually stinky, filthy. They are viewed as society's waste, thieves, ignorant beggars, uneducated urchins who are unable to climb the social ladder into a happier life. This is what finally we can understand when we refer to the chapter number 2. So everything that I explained in chapter number 2 is actually explained here. This is what we can understand when we refer to chapter number 2. So you can write down, you can complete this, and you can leave the meeting. So today we completed chapter number 2 and we showed the main theme, that is nature and nurture, right? That is the main theme that we discussed. We discussed in a much more broader manner and discussed a lot of other sub themes as well. So next week we are going to read chapter number 3. And most probably we will be able to complete 5 chapters within this month because you have an extra class as well, right? So we will try our level best to complete 5 chapters. Then we will be able to complete the book by the end of October or November, right? Then we can do some past paper questions regarding this particular novel, right? So please make sure to participate for the class. Make sure to complete your notes because then you have a positive chance of writing or selecting any other novel that you like. So the recording will be available next week. Make sure to get the recording and complete your notes. If you have finished, you can leave the meeting. We will meet next week. Thank you so much.
Ui. Có số lắm.